everyone, it's Sami from Sami's Sweet Life, and today I am talking about my VBAC versus scheduled C-section birth plan. This is a really simple yet complicated situation because, for one thing, I am eligible for the VBAC, but there are certain conditions that have to be met. One is I can't go overdue, and the problem with that is I was almost 2 weeks overdue with Olivia. I did end up getting induced. I was having contractions, but I wasn't showing any signs of actual labor. I have theories now on what I think happened, why I went so overdue, but like my whole labor with her did not go as planned. It's probably pretty realistic to think I'm gonna go overdue again. So backing up, after I had the C-section, I went to talk to the doctor later. I had an appointment with her before we ended up moving here, where I just wanted to make sure that everything went fine. I wanted to talk about the birth and talk about the possibility of a VBAC, and this was before we even were sure about number 2. This was before we even moved to Austin. I talked to the same doctor that did my C-section, and she thinks I'm 100% eligible for a VBAC. And she thinks the only reason why I ended up with a C-section was because her head literally got stuck, and it does happen. She had a 99th percentile head, so like pretty much the largest head that you could have. And you can see in the first picture I posted of her on Instagram when we announced her birth, you can see the part where the vacuum was trying to pull her out, and it was like the widest part of her head. So her head was the biggest head possible, and she was trying to come out on the widest part of her head, and she just wasn't gonna fit. And I think, looking back, I think that's why I never really went into full labor on my own, because her head was just so big and it wasn't engaging the right way. There are two things I think were kind of against this. I do have a tilted uterus, and I also have an arcuate uterus. It's not quite like a septate or a bicornate uterus where there's like 2 lobes, but it has a thickening up at the top. So I'm thinking that had something to do with her positioning being off with those 2 uterus issues. So I'm thinking that's probably what led to her head being tilted in the wrong direction. Also, she was just so massively overdue that she was huge. That really is what it came down to. Like when I was talking to the OB about it, she said she would induce at 38 or 39 weeks, and then I could have the VBAC, because she said she was just so large she would never recommend me going past 40 weeks for the second time around. Statistically speaking, usually your second baby is larger, so she would definitely not let me go past 40 weeks. And so going with that, going to the new doctor's a little bit different. They definitely don't want me going past 40 weeks as well, but they do not induce. So that kind of puts a wrench in the plan. They are saying they want to do a scheduled C-section by 39 to 40 weeks, and we'll kind of play it by ear. That 39 to 40 weeks we'll monitor the baby's size really closely. They don't want the same situation happening where I go into labor and then cannot push the baby out, because it has such a massive head. So they're gonna monitor the size really closely and schedule a C-section if I go past a certain point. And the thing with that is they're all for me having VBAC so long as I go into labor on my own. So if I go into labor before that 39th week, I can have the VBAC. Like when I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking about the previous birth, I feel like the chances of this, of me going not only into labor on my own, but actually early, is just like slim. I just don't see it happening. So if I had to bet on it, I would bet I'm gonna have a scheduled C-section, just because timing's not gonna line up, but I really want that VBAC. Definitely don't want to go against medical advice or have to find another doctor who will induce me, because induction does pose the risk of uterine rupture. To be honest, when my previous OB said that we could induce at 38 or 39 weeks, I was like, wow, I really don't want to be induced again. So I'm kind of thankful that this doctor's office doesn't induce. When I've read about it, you get the higher percentage of uterine rupture, and that's something you want to avoid. Like that's a really scary complication. I'm not going to say it's not a possibility, because it surely could be a possibility. I could definitely go into labor on my own and get the VBAC that I really, really want, but the chances of it are probably slim. So I'm really keeping my expectations low. And if the worst thing that happens is I have to schedule my C-section, I get to pick the birthday and I get to, go in and in an hour have a baby, that's not the worst thing that could happen. So I'm very much okay with either thing, but I have that feeling like I want to be able to push out my own child and do the thing that women are made to do. And it's so funny because it doesn't change anything. Like me having the C-section didn't affect anything. I still bonded with my kid, I still breastfed, I still was 100% her mother, but I still had that feeling like, oh, I'm not woman enough because I didn't push a kid out my vag. And I don't know why I have that feeling. I think a lot of women have that feeling when they do have a C-section, but I'm going into it thinking I'll probably just have a scheduled C-section because everything has to align perfectly for this VBAC to even be a possibility. And at the end of the day, if I do go into labor on my own, there's still a chance that I would end up in a C-section situation. So it's just not a guarantee, and I'm not banking on it being a guarantee. I'm definitely more go with the flow this time because it's not up to me. Whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. I'm gonna do what's best for the baby and me because we just want a healthy outcome. That's really what it comes down to. And it's gonna change nothing. Like if I do get the VBAC, I'll have this vindicated feeling like, yes, I did it, but it's gonna last for like 2 seconds. Like it's not a big deal. It's not gonna change my life in any way. Like having this VBAC that I really want. And as silly as it is, and as silly as how much I really want this VBAC, I just know that it's not that important and I'm gonna be fine either way. And like looking back at Olivia's birth, I'm so lucky I got the C-section because if the vacuum had worked, I would have been in the situation where I would have had a 3rd or 4th degree tear because her head was so big and it was not fitting through and I would have just been wrecked. And I'm so thankful that I did have the C-section and everything down there is really intact. And that's something I think about the second time. Like if I already had one big baby, I'm kind of scared to go down that route and wreck everything the second time just for the sake of getting that VBAC that I want because I just want it. I want that second chance at getting the birth experience that I wanted. And it's silly and I just don't know why it matters so much, and I'm not the only one that it matters for. I know there are a lot of people who end up with a C-section and they do get really devastated about it. So basically, if I go into labor on my own before 39th week, maybe they'll let me wait until the 40th week. I could have the VBAC, and if not, we'll get the C-section scheduled on my 40-week day, if not even sooner than that, depending on the baby's size. When they say it's time to schedule the C-section, it's gonna be time to schedule the C-section. I trust them so much. There's a lot more risks going overdue the second time after a C-section. So I'm really, gonna stick with what they say, hope for the best, but expect to have a scheduled C-section. So I saw this OB before I even got pregnant, and I knew the situation before getting pregnant. So if the worst thing that happens is I get a scheduled C-section, it's not the end of the world. I will be like, darn it, I didn't get that VBAC that I wanted. So basically I'm going into it with very low expectations. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, that's okay too. I'm keeping my eye on the prize more so than the birth plan. I care to a certain extent, but I also don't care because I just want a healthy baby. After going through the early losses, I want to make it to the end. I want to make it to the finish line with a healthy baby, and the rest is kind of irrelevant. And I will say one more thing about having the C-section. I did push for over 3 hours and her head was stuck, but I hurt worse. My recovery was worse for down there versus my incision. Just the pains from the pushing and the little stretching that did happen down there was way worse. So I also keep that in mind. Like my C-section recovery wasn't that bad. I'll be pleasantly surprised if it happens, low expectations versus like, yes, I'm getting the VBAC no matter what, and being really disappointed in the end. I don't want to be disappointed because at the end of the day, that's not what's important. I realized that because I was so disappointed about my C-section with her, and at the end of the day, it didn't matter. It didn't change anything. So I learned that the first time that like, yeah, it was disappointing, but at the end of the day, it didn't change anything. It didn't change anything about who I am or like my momliness. It just was what it was. I think we both would have been in super serious trouble if C-sections weren't a thing. So I'm thankful that C-sections exist. So I'm keeping my eye on the prize, and that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know there are a lot of us out there that really wish we could get the VBAC or wish we didn't have a C-section in the first place. And I know that feeling like, oh, you just really wish you could have just done it yourself. But at the end of the day, the baby matters, and however the baby gets here doesn't really matter. So anyway, I hope you guys found this video helpful. Be sure to give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.